Okay, third lecture, dealing with supply and demand, and this one deals with pricing. What we're really talking about now is how do companies know how much they should charge for goods or services? How do we figure this stuff out without a government involved? In other words, how do markets work? Well, the first thing we have to understand with pricing is really the role that companies play. And the first thing is you don't go to the store and dictate your price on most goods. Yes, there's some stuff you can negotiate, but that being said, even when you negotiate for a car, they still have a price in mind. And many car dealerships now have gotten rid of negotiations. So how do the car companies and the rest of these companies know how much to charge? Well, that's a question they have to answer. Another question for you is, what is a company's goal? And every company on earth has the same goal. That's to make profit. Profit is simply to sell as many goods as possible at the highest price. Now, profit is also taking into account all of the costs of all your factors of production, and then you set your price in that difference. So after you pay for all your expenses, how much money do you have left over? That's your profit. Companies don't sell stuff cheaper than they want to, or than they have to, I should say. Companies never want to sell stuff cheap. They always want to make as much money as possible. The price then is determined by markets. Markets are kind of a fuzzy topic. And you sit here and you go, well, what is a market? A market is simply anywhere buyers and sellers meet. This could be two kids sitting down at a lunch table where one is trading a ding-dong for a Twinkie. We have a buyer and a seller. Markets don't have to be physical because of the internet. Now markets are anywhere that two people have access. Whoopsie. Anywhere two people have access to each other. One is a buyer, one is a seller. Sorry, I get a little distracted when I have to mess with my computer. Apologize for that. All right, here we have our first graph, and we see we've got our vertical axis and our horizontal axis. So we have our price, 0 through 20, and our quantity at the midpoint of 10. And so we first put in our demand line. Again, you should be drawing this supply and demand graph. This is a combined graph, a mixed graph. First we see demand. So here's our schedule, or our graph of all of the different possibilities. And then we add in supply. And so we should already start to see some things here as far as them connecting. Well, the first thing we do is look at D1. And we look at where these two things connect. At $10, consumers will purchase 10 goods. This equals a demand of 10. Well, on the other side, producers, suppliers. At $10, producers will create 10 goods, so we will supply 10. This is called equilibrium. There is no surplus and there is no shortage. In other words, everyone who wants to buy something is able to buy something and is willing to spend the money, has what they want. Now, of course, there's people who want it, but we have to rule out this factor. Number one, some people can never afford it. At $10, some people can't afford it. And then we have to rule out the people that at $10 don't think it's worth it. Now, are there companies that can produce it? Yes, but not for $10. So we could have more supply, but they'd have to charge more. This is the goal. Market price. We want to look always where these two things connect. All right, we continue with this then. And so we've got our demand and our supply. Our original market price of 10 and our quantity of 10. So I would be drawing a new graph right now. We have our original market price of 10 and our original market quantity of 10. There's no surplus, no shortage. Uh-oh, something changed. Well, what changed? We know it wasn't initially price, but we know something changed. It was an increase in demand. Why? Because it moved to the right. And here we see our new market price. Now we have a price of greater than 10. And yes, we can say 12.25 or whatever we want, 12.5. All we need to know is it's greater than 10. And a quantity that's greater than 10. Here's what we know about market price then. As demand increases, price increases, and quantity increases. So we have to look at, we have four situations. We have an increase in demand, a decrease in demand, an increase in supply, and a decrease in supply. And we're going to work through these tomorrow. But the biggest thing to understand is this, that, hey, an increase in demand means the price goes up and the quantity goes up. So it's directly related. New graph. Here we see our original price and quantity, our original market, and something changed. Oof. What happened here? Well, for whatever reason, one of those 6 possible things, we now have a new market price because demand decreased. Now the price has decreased to less than $10, and the quantity has decreased to less than 10. So now, a decrease in demand means that what happens? Price goes down and quantity goes down. So whenever there's a decrease in demand, price goes down and quantity goes down. New graph. Should be pretty obvious what happens now. Here is our original market price of 10 and 10. And now, this is where you will get confused. Many of you are saying we have a decrease in supply. Incorrect. The reason you say it's a decrease in supply is because you're looking below the original S1 line. But that's not what we have to do. We can't look at this as vertical. We have to look at this as horizontal. So we have an increase in supply because it has moved further away from zero. So we have an increase in supply. Now we have a new market price. And whenever supply increases, we see that price is now greater than $10. And price is now less than $10. And quantity is greater than $10. So whenever there's an increase in supply, we know 2 things happen. Number 1, the price goes down and the quantity goes up. Fourth option, original market price, 10 and 10. And now we have a decrease in supply. Again, some of you are going, this doesn't make any sense. It's above the line. We don't care about above or below. We care about left and right. Left or right. So here's what we see. Original market price changes to our new market price, and now our price has increased and our quantity has decreased. So every time there's a decrease in supply, price goes up and quantity goes down. I guarantee if you didn't write down these arrows and the relationship between them, you should stop and go back to the beginning of this video, because you need to understand this for the test and to understand the basic principles of economics. Now we have some critical questions. What is the best scenario for consumers? Out of all 4 of these things, we could have an increase in either supply or demand and a decrease in either supply or demand. What is the best scenario for consumers? Which of these 4? It is an increase in supply. Why? Because more goods equal lower prices. When Walmart comes to town, we get more goods. When a Target comes to town, we get more goods, and Walmart has to compete. If a Shopko came to town, if a Costco, if anyone else opens up, what has to happen is they have to compete, and the first area they compete is price because there is an increase in supply. Okay, then, that helps consumers, but what about producers? What is the best scenario for producers? Again, we have our 4 options: an increase in demand, a decrease in demand, an increase in supply, or a decrease in supply. What is the best scenario for producers? An increase in demand. Apple makes the original iPod. What happens? More people want it. And what happens to the price eventually? It goes up because you can sell more for higher prices. That's the goal. Now, on that note, we do see a problem for Apple because they have competition. But the increase in demand allows them to charge more for the goods they have. And so if Target goes out of business and Cub goes out of business and Coburn's goes out of business, and the only place you can shop in town for groceries is Walmart, what happens to prices? It goes up. Why? Because they don't have to compete. All right, this is the finish of the third. Don't feel bad if you have to go back and look at this a couple of times. We will finish with our floors and ceilings next time.